And there we go. We're live streaming. You're good to go.
Thank you. Well, hello and welcome to the Committee of Adjustment meeting. As Secretary Treasurer of the committee, I declare this meeting open at 6:33 p.m. Our first matter this evening is to appoint an acting chair for the committee in Mayor Peckford's absence. The motion for the committee to consider is as follows: that the Committee of Adjustment appoint Councillor John Barkley as acting chair for tonight's meeting. May I have a mover and a seconder? Deb Wilson and Doreen. All in favor?
Yes.
Perfect. Motion carried. Councillor Barkley, on to you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. So the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from May 11th. So I'm looking for a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of May 11th as circulated. So Councillor Straker-Yan moves and looking for a seconder. Councillor O'Sullivan or Councillor Wilson is seconds. So
doesn't matter.
Yeah, okay. So be it resolved that those minutes of May 11th are approved as circulated. All in favor? There we go. And that's carried. Okay. Now, are any members of the committee declaring any disclosure of interest regarding any of the applications that we have before us today? The Committee of Adjustments? No?
Not
No.
for me.
No. Okay. Let me read the following. The Committee of Adjustment will now hold a public meeting to consider application number A-06-22 for lands located at 535 Denison Road, Part Lot 21, Concession 5, Township of Oxford on Rideau, now the Municipality of North Grenville, to permit a new single-family dwelling larger than the current non-conforming dwelling. I'm advising you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed minor variance application. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions at this public meeting or written submissions before the committee makes a decision on the proposed variance application, the Ontario Lands Tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Our Secretary Treasurer, Debbie Wood, will keep a record summary of this meeting. Any persons who wish further notice of the committee's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to Debbie Wood, Secretary Treasurer, following adjournment of this public meeting. So now, are there anyone here for this public meeting regarding 535 Denison? Could you please acknowledge? Am I seeing everybody on the screen? You can acknowledge by either raising your hand or unmuting yourself if that's possible. Doesn't look like we have anyone. Oh, Amanda Gold is here. Okay, welcome, Amanda. I'll now pass the meeting over to Amy Martin, Director of Planning and Development, who will give us an overview of the application. Take it away, Director Martin.
Thank you, Councillor Barkley. So our first application this evening for the Committee of Adjustment is for 535 Denison Road. Next slide, please. The property is located within the rural area and it's quite a large rural lot. The property has split zoning, both a rural commercial and an agricultural zone on the property. A portion of the property is and has been used for residential purposes. Next slide, please. So the variance being requested this evening is to provide relief from section 6.27A4 of the comprehensive zoning bylaw to permit the enlargement of a non-conforming single detached dwelling from 1,162 square feet to 2,120 square feet. So the redevelopment on the property is due to a loss of the previous dwelling to a fire. And as part of the redevelopment process, they're seeking to enlarge the dwelling. The reason why we're coming underneath the general provisions for non-conforming uses is the fact that the portion of the property where the dwelling is to be located is zoned rural commercial, which does not permit a single detached dwelling as a permitted use. However, it does permit an accessory dwelling use. So to that end, the use of the property just for a single detached dwelling is considered non-conforming. And so we're going through the policies of section 6.27A. And you do, as you can see here, this is the proposed dwelling that's to be constructed on the property, and the location of where the previous house was will be converted into an accessory structure that's accessory to the residential use. Next slide, please. And this is just a profile drawing of what's to be constructed. Next slide, please. So the official plan designation on the property is agriculture and mineral aggregate. As mentioned, the zoning is split between the rural commercial, which is the area in which the house is to be located, and agriculture 1. The property is 26 acres in size, so it is quite large. And again, it has that non-conforming status just in relation to the fact that the rural commercial zone only permits an accessory residential use. And as there is no commercial development on the property, and there was a previous dwelling that existed, again, it enjoys that non-conforming status. Next slide, please. So it's the recommendation of staff that the Committee of Adjustment grant relief for the property at 535 Denison Road to provide relief from section 6.27A to allow for the enlargement of a non-conforming single detached dwelling from 1,162 square feet to 2,120 square feet. Through our review of the comprehensive zoning bylaw and the official plan, it was deemed that the proposed dwelling maintains the intent of these planning documents, and that the enlargement of a non-conforming single detached dwelling is desirable and appropriate in the agricultural and mineral aggregate designations. Next slide, please. I believe that concludes the formal presentation. If there's any questions from members of council, followed by members of the public, I will take those questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. I guess we'll go to questions from the council, first of all.
That concludes the formal presentation. If there's any questions from members of council, followed by members.
Oh, there we go. A little bit of a lag there. So any questions from members of council on this application before I go to members of the public? Seeing none. So now we'll hear from the applicant, followed by members of the public who wish to speak either for or against the proposal. Following any comments from the public, the applicant will be offered an opportunity to respond to questions raised. So is there anyone here for the applicant? Ms. Gould, are you here for the applicant? Oh, okay. Thank you. You're here for another matter. I don't believe there's anyone here for the applicant. No questions from council and no questions from the applicant. Anyone here against the proposal? I guess that's the other question I should ask. I don't see anybody either. So I have one question, Amy. Wouldn't it, I mean, we're having a minor variance on an existing non-conforming status because of the zoning. Is it more complicated and expensive to go through like a zoning change? I mean, it seems like historically this was possibly zoned for aggregate and agriculture, but for a long time it's been a residence.
So thank you, Councillor Barclay. Certainly that conversation was explored with the designer who is working with the property owners in regards to the redevelopment of the single detached dwelling, and they wanted to not rezone. One, the rezoning process does take a bit longer. Minor variance was a faster route to moving towards that building permit stage, but they wanted to retain that that zone on the property for the future. It's, you know, once, you know, especially commercial uses, once the zoning is removed from the property, it's often more difficult to put it back on, just because of you know, commercial uses usually aren't as tenable or acceptable as a use compared to a residential use. So that conversation was had, and it was their option to go through the minor variance process.
Okay. It just seems like, anyways, I'm not going to question the Planning Act and how things work, but we've got a minor variance on a non-conforming status of something. But anyways, if it's simpler and easier, that's the way to go, obviously. I guess we'll now table the resolution for the committee to consider, and let me read it. So I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for the following. Be it resolved that the committee approve application A-06-22 for the following minor variance on the lands located at 535 Denison Road, Part Lot 21, Concession 5, Geographic Township of Oxford-on-Rideau, now the Municipality of North Grenville, to provide relief from section 6.27A4 of Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 50-12 to permit an increase in the size of a new single-family dwelling larger than the current non-conforming dwelling. So, can I get a mover for that?
I'll move it.
Yeah, Councillor O'Sullivan, and seconded by Councillor Stracher-Yan. Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor?
Yes.
Great. All right. On we go. Do we have to adjourn this public meeting? No, we just slide into the next one? Great. Thank you so much. I didn't see that prompt, but I didn't feel confident. Okay, the Committee of Adjustment will now hold a public meeting to consider application number A-7-22 for lands located at 709 Slater Road, Lot 7, Concession 2, Township of Oxford-on-Rideau, now the Municipality of North Grenville, to permit the establishment of a second driveway access. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you might have with respect to the proposed minor variance application. If the appellant does not provide oral submissions at this public meeting or written submissions before the committee makes a decision on the proposed variance application, the Ontario Lands Tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Our Secretary Treasurer, Debbie Wood, will keep a record summary of this meeting. Thank you, Debbie. Any persons who wish further notice of the committee's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to Debbie Wood, Secretary Treasurer, following adjournment of this public meeting. Are there people here for this public meeting? Could you please identify yourself? This is for 709 Slater Street. You can either raise your hand or I believe they can unmute themselves. I don't. Let me check this other page here.
Yes, yep.
Oh, Paul, Mr.
Yep.
Gaw,
Yep.
you're here and speaking to this public hearing, either
Yes.
for, are you representing the applicant? Are you the applicant?
Well, my son is the applicant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Are you speaking on his behalf?
I am. I thought he was on here, but apparently not. So,
Oh, okay. Well, oh, I hear somebody. Eric.
I think
Eric,
I'm here.
Tim.
Yes,
Mhm.
Eric.
This
Hi.
is me.
All right, Eric
Hi.
and Paul Gaw, welcome. I'll now pass the meeting over to Amy Martin, our Director of Planning and Development, and she'll give an overview of the application for 709 Slater. Take it away.
Thank you, Councillor Barkley. So our final application for the Committee of Adjustment this evening is for 709 Slater Road. Next slide, please. The property is located within the rural area of the municipality at the intersection of Slater Road and County Road 22. As is evidenced by the aerial photograph, you can tell it is a large agricultural piece of property, and the property is actively farmed. Next slide, please. So the variance is to seek permission from some new provisions we've amended into the zoning bylaw in regards to additional residential units to permit a second driveway, a separate driveway associated with an additional residential unit, which is contrary to our policy as per section 6.9B. So in consideration of the application, when you start to look at the site characteristics and where the proposed additional residential unit is being located, it makes sense to have a separate unit. The intent oftentimes is to try and have that additional residential unit located closer to the existing single detached dwelling, and that's more so to prevent any kind of those misconceptions about being able to sever the property, given the zoning of this property being agricultural, and the underlying designation being agricultural. There would be no possibility of severing off the additional residential unit. The counties have also provided a permit to support the entrance, so there's no issues on the county's from the county's perspective on being able to support an additional residential unit in that area. And so from just a limitation based on how the operation of the existing farm operation on the property, plus where the other, the main principal dwelling unit is on the property, staff are comfortable in granting permission to permit a separate entrance for the additional residential unit. Next slide, please. Just some property characteristics. The property is designated agriculture, as mentioned, as well as mineral aggregate. The zoning is agriculture 1, so supporting that agricultural use, and it's 90 acres in size. It's currently used as an agricultural operation with an existing single detached dwelling, and the proposed use being added is that additional residential unit with a separate entrance. And the additional residential unit is in conformity with our new policies adopted by council back in December. Next slide, please. So it is at this time that, staff are recommending that the Committee of Adjustment grant permission to permit the separate driveway. It was deemed to be minor and meeting the intent of our comprehensive zoning bylaw and our official plan, and it is appropriate in the agriculture and mineral aggregate designation. And at this time, that ends my formal presentation. I'll take questions from members of the committee, followed by members of the public, should there be any.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Martin. Any questions from committee members to Ms. Martin regarding her presentation?
I have a question.
Yes,
Dorian.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it's
Councillor
just
Sullivan.
a technicality. On the first document, it says the subject is 709 Gaw Road. And I think Gaw is the applicant and
Yes.
the address is Slater Road. So just to clarify that.
That is correct. Sorry, that was a typo in going back and forth between the documents and referencing the applicant versus the road. It's meant to be Slater Road. So my apologies.
I expected that. That's okay. Thanks. Just wanted to be sure that it was, I was clear that there weren't two different roads. So, okay.
Good eye. Councillor Stark. Oh, Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Barclay. I wanted to know, and this may have came to council prior to my engagement. Was this a lot that was severed as part of the whole property, Amy?
No. So, yeah. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So no, the property hasn't been severed. The policies within the agricultural designation would prohibit the property from being severed to create a new residential lot. The additional residential unit is a solution to allow for family to continue to live on the farmland and participate in that operation. And again, providing an opportunity for an additional residential unit in absence of being able to sever the property.
Okay, thank you for your answer. And to add to that, is this something that we typically do as at Committee of Adjustment with aggregate? Like, are there farm families that are asking to do this, or is this something new?
So additional residential units, so residential units that were secondary to, like, for farm help have been permitted in the zoning bylaw. We did update the provisions to remove it because we have very comprehensive additional residential unit policies that exist. Typically, the farm help provision was related to, they had to be actively involved in the farm, and sometimes that, the owner, it was onerous and rigorous to determine how do you classify, is this truly for someone who's looking for farm help. So I mean, our policy updates certainly have made that a little more clear and more as of right in those accessory additional residential units on the property. What's new in this case is that we did introduce and trying to ensure that we're keeping the additional residential units close to the existing development on the property, reduce that requirement down to only a shared entrance. But certainly we do have the ability through the Planning Act to review applications on a case-by-case basis where appropriate to deviate from those provisions, again, as appropriate, and based on the existing configuration of the property and just where the proposed additional residential unit was located, and of course with the counties providing a sign-off for a separate entrance. That was part of the rationales to why a separate entrance could be supported.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Director Martin. Thank you.
Councillor
That's all
O'Sullivan?
I have.
Yep, okay, thank you. Councillor O'Sullivan?
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Barkley. I do have a question. It's where the existing house is, there's no reference to a well or septic system. And yet where the approximate location of the new house is, there's an approximate location of a new well, but it says the existing septic. So that seems pretty far away from the existing house. So I'm just a little confused because very often the secondary residents can share the septic and well, but obviously in this case, there's going to be a new well. But is there a new septic? Because that says an existing septic, which is pretty far away from the existing house.
Perhaps Eric or Paul could respond as to the servicing for their dwelling.
Yeah, I'll open it up to them, but I have an additional question, and we'll just reserve that question for when we open it up to the rest of the public attending. So, Amy, back in December, we permitted additional dwellings as opposed to previously were secondary dwellings, and the rationale for not permitting a second driveway is what? I'm questioning that we might, with people building additional property on their land, that we might see a lot of people coming forward looking for exemption or permission for a second driveway. But what's the rationale behind sharing a driveway?
So certainly it's to try and keep the development within, within close proximity, especially, the policy didn't really consider some of these larger lots in the sense of on the agricultural side, but certainly where you have a large, say a rural piece of land, it's to just concentrate the development in one location without further disturbing other areas, in the sense that it's meant to truly be secondary to that residential use. To have it located somewhere else on the property defeats the purpose of that accessory to the principal dwelling. And it's also to reduce the number of entrances coming out onto, especially county roads, because county roads are a little more, especially from a density perspective, we're always concerned about how many entrances they have in an area. And it's to prevent that future severancing of the additional residential units from the property, which we do get requests for new residential lot creation, and ensuring that, again, it's that accessory use to the residential use on the property is the intent of the ARU policy. So that's why we do encourage them to be located adjacent to the principal dwelling on the property. Okay,
all right. And I'm sure most of the applications for additional dwellings or construction of additional dwellings are for family members and that kind of thing. Okay, so now the committee will hear from the applicant, followed by members of the public who wish to speak either for or against the proposal. Following any comments from the public, the applicant will be offered the opportunity to respond to questions raised. So Eric and Paul, there was a question from Councillor O'Sullivan. I don't know if are you willing to address the question that Councillor O'Sullivan had? Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, just to clarify that, I think it was a typo on that. I believe I got my architect to change it where it shouldn't have said existing. It was supposed to be proposed septic. And I think that's the typo on my architect's part, because I didn't want there to be any confusion that was the existing one. Yes, the original farmhouse does have both their own well and septic. They are this everything is proposed just to be new. So it's in my eye, it's just a typo.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, a good question, Councillor O'Sullivan. Eric or Paul, did you want to speak? Tell us anything else about this, or you said your piece?
No, that's okay. That's it on if there's any other questions, I can answer them, but no, that's all right. I'm good. So is there anyone here attending this meeting wanting to speak against the application? Now is the time. Well, I don't see any. So let's table the resolution, and I'll be looking again for a mover and a seconder. And the resolution is as follows. Be it
resolved that the committee approve application A-07-22 for the following minor variance on the lands located at 709 Slater Road, Lot 7, Concession 2, Geographic Township of South Gore, now the Municipality of North Grenville, to provide relief from Section 6.9C of Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 50-12 to seek permission for the establishment of a second driveway access. Looking for a mover for that? Councillor Wilson, and a
I'll
seconder,
second it.
Councillor O'Sullivan. Thank you very much. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Yes,
Okay, great. So that's passed. Thanks very much. I believe that closes. We need to move to adjourn the public meeting. And just a reminder, what did I want to tell people? Okay, no, I think I've got it covered. So I'll be looking for a mover and a seconder for the following resolution. Be it resolved that this meeting of the Municipality of North Grenville Committee of Adjustment is adjourned at 6:57 p.m. Someone to move that?
I will.
Councillor O'Sullivan, Councillor Strackerian, seconds. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Yes.
Great. Okay, that's done. Thank you very much, everybody. And next, I'll turn it over to our clerk, Heather Babcock-Cormier. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Barkley. In the absence of Mayor Peckford as clerk, I'm calling the council meeting to order at 6:59 p.m. The first matter to be addressed is the appointment of an acting chair for this meeting in the absence of Mayor Peckford. The motion before council is to appoint Councillor John Barkley as acting chair. Can I please have a mover?
I will.
Thank you, Councillor O'Sullivan and Councillor Wilson as the seconder, and I'll call the question.
Do I
Thank
vote?
you.
Yeah, I guess I
You
do.
can, but
Okay.
yep. So that's been moved.
I'm not-
So the
I'm not acting chair under protest. In other words.
yep, the motion's passed, and I will now pass the chair over to Councillor Barkley.
Great. So the first item on the agenda, I'm going to go to Councillor Deb Wilson to give us our land acknowledgement. Well, I'm calling the meeting to. Oh, you did that, Heather.
Call.
Great. Okay, so Councillor Wilson, take it away.
Thank you, Acting Chair, Councillor Barkley. The municipality of North Grenville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe. We honor the historic relationship of the Haudenosaunee and Huron-Wendat peoples to this land. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who now call North Grenville their home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship with all Indigenous peoples, and we look forward to continuing this conversation and fostering the path towards reconciliation.
Great, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Next item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as presented. Councillor O'Sullivan, and to second it. Councillor Wilson, all in favor? Okay, so we've adopted the agenda as presented. The next item is disclosure of interest. Does anyone have any disclosures of interest regarding the items today? None? No, okay. We don't have any presentations or delegations, is that correct, Ms. Babcock-Cormier? Yep.
That's correct.
And the consent agenda, there's one item suggested by staff, and those are to deal with the council meeting minutes of May 11th. Any objection to making that part of the consent agenda?
No.
No, okay. So we go on to reports. Nothing from Office of the CAO, Finance, Office of the Clerk, nothing, and Planning and Development. So now we're into our first of four public meetings. And the first one deals with the following. Okay, so now council will now hold a virtual public meeting to consider an application to amend the zoning on the lands located at 5 Clothier Street West from residential first density R1 to downtown commercial exception C1-13. I'm advising you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If an applicant does not provide oral comments at this meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the local planning appeal tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any persons who wish further notice of the council's decisions concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to the Director of Planning and Development, Amy Martin, via email following adjournment of this public meeting. Contact information can be found on the notice of public meeting and will be provided at the end of the presentation. Anyone wishing to ask a question during the public meeting can do so by clicking the raise hand option here on the Zoom dashboard. When asking a question, please identify yourself and provide your address and postal code to the clerk to record as part of the public record. Are there any people here for this public meeting? Can you please acknowledge yourself? Okay, Timo, Tracy Zander, Peter Twilley. Are you, I only see those three. Is there a fourth? No. Oh, and David Howard. Okay. And Tracy Zander, you're obviously Zander Plan, and you have colleagues with you. So the actual applicant, is that Howard?
Mr. Chair, the
Yeah.
Howard application is one of the later ones on your agenda. So
Oh, I
Mr.
see.
Twilley and Mr. Slabbert are here for this first application.
And are they the applicants? The actual
They are.
applicants? Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll now pass the meeting over to the Director of Planning and Development, Amy Martin. Amy, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barkley. And I do note, and in consultation with Tracy when I was scheduling public meetings, that just by some stroke of luck or maybe genius, that the majority of the files we're dealing with tonight are in fact files that are related to Zander Plan. So it's great that we can consolidate them to support our consultants. So our first application being considered tonight for a zoning bylaw amendment is for 5 Clothier Street West. Sorry, I'll clarify West. We do have East and West on Clothier Street. Next slide, please. So the property is located on the northwest side of the Rideau Street, Clothier Street intersection. I think many people are quite familiar with where this property is located. It's within what we consider to be our downtown corridor. Next slide, please. Just an aerial view, you can see that there's an existing residential structure on the property with parking located at the rear. Next slide, please. So the official plan designation of the property is downtown commercial. However, the zoning is currently residential first density. The property is currently being used as a 9-room boarding house, and it sits on about 0.17 acres within the downtown. Surrounding land uses include low density residential as well as downtown commercial uses. Next slide, please. So the proposed development that's coming forward would be to convert the existing building into 6 one-bedroom apartments. The proposal is to have 6 parking spaces dedicated to the residential units located at the rear of the property. And there would also be a space within the building for a commercial space to meet the intent of our official plan policy, which requires there to be a commercial element of about 46 square meters. There is on-street parking located within the area, and part of the exception zone considerations this evening is for a reduction in parking from 10 parking spots down to 6. And that again is those spots would support the residential use, and any parking associated with the commercial use would utilize existing on-street parking and certainly encourage pedestrian connectivity throughout the downtown. Next slide, please. So in reviewing the application for this evening's public meeting, we consider various levels of policy within the planning realm, the first being the provincial policy statement. And it is noted that healthy, livable, and safe communities are sustained by promoting efficient development and land use patterns and accommodating an appropriate, affordable, and market-based range and mix of residential types. The province also identifies our settlement areas that should be the focus of growth and development, and new development is encouraged near existing built-up areas and should be compact and form, mixed uses and densities that allow for efficient use of land, infrastructure, and public services. Next slide, please. The United Counties official plan is the upper tier document which the municipality must conform to, and their policy document conforms to the policies of the provincial policy statement. So the urban settlement areas are prime centers for growth and development and urban activities, including residential development. And the county official plan also encourages local municipalities to focus the development of affordable housing within our urban areas, which provides the greatest opportunity for a range of housing forms, types, and tenures. Next slide, please. Within our own official plan, we do have growth management policies, which encourages that we promote infill and residential intensification. And certainly this project amplifies that residential intensification piece, going from a 9-room boarding house to creating 6 separate residential units. Section 10.3 of our official plan does establish land use policies for the downtown commercial designation, and it is a policy of the official plan to encourage growth in the residential population of the downtown commercial area and adjacent gateway areas. And this is to be achieved through new development and the renovation and conversion of existing buildings. So certainly meeting the intent of section 10.3 of the official plan. Next slide, please. Furthering on the policies for the downtown, we are to provide accessory residential units and multiple unit. They are permitted and shall generally be located to the rear and upper stories of the building. And then section 10.3.8 notes that the efficient utilization of lands and buildings within the downtown will be encouraged through the development of vacant or underutilized land and functionally obsolete buildings, and the rehabilitation where feasible of buildings that are functionally viable but substandard and require improvements in appearance and or condition. So certainly, again, renovating an existing building to provide more rental units within the downtown continues to meet the policy of the official plan. Next slide, please. So the proposed amendment would rezone the property from the residential first density zone to the downtown commercial zone, so matching the underlying official plan designation, and that a minimum of 6 parking spaces, including 1 accessible parking space, will be provided. As mentioned, based on the proposed number of units and the commercial use, the official plan, the zoning bylaw, when undertaking the parking calculation, requires 10 spaces, but given the existing development on the lot, a maximum of 6 spaces can be supported, which would align with the number of units on the property. So every individual unit will have a parking space, and then the commercial unit would have on-street parking available to the proprietors of the business to access. Next slide, please. In regard to the application, we received no objections from the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority or the Health Unit, and I also note that we received no comments from members of the public in regards to this application. Next slide, please. So it is the recommendation that council support zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 0422 to rezone the property at 5 Clothier Street West to the downtown commercial exception zone to permit the conversion of the building to 6 1-bedroom units and a 46 square meter commercial space. So that ends the formal part of my presentation. I'll take questions from members of council, followed by any questions from members of the public. And I do note that Ms. Zander is here as part of the applicant's team to answer any more site-specific questions beyond the policy analysis that staff did.
Thank you, Director Martin. Just a question on procedure. Do we not hear from the applicant and other people before we go to council on this type of thing? I have no objection to going to council, but
certainly
the question should be directed to you then.
Question. Yeah, I mean, certainly Ms. Zander can provide and speak to the application prior to any questions being taken.
Is that your wish, Ms. Zander? Did you want to speak to the application before questions, or?
Thank you, Councillor Barkley. I don't really have anything to add. Your planners well covered the proposal, so I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Great. So I'll go to Councillor Strakoyan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Barkley. To you, Director Martin, I guess regarding the parking spaces, I'm not going to wade into the whether or not there's sufficient parking in the downtown core. I think we've already had that conversation once today with amongst ourselves. But the reduction from 10 to 6 is a result of the renovations that are taking place. Is there work that's being done that will take up the existing 4 spaces? Is that correct? I'm not seeing that clearly explained in the report.
Yeah, so the through you, Councillor Barkley. So the parking on site is not being changed from what it currently exists and what can be supported. So there's no additions that are being added on to the building, as it's the conversion of. So because we're converting the use of that building from being what was a boarding house with 9 bedrooms into the 6 units plus the commercial space, then we have to apply our parking standard as per the comprehensive zoning bylaw. And that's where we ran into there's a bit of a number crunch in regards to the number of parking spaces required. So it's integral that, supporting those residential units and having parking spaces on site. As they'll be the predominant use on the property, and anticipating that, access from a business perspective would maintain just general business hours. So you're not anticipating that they'll need longer term parking.
So 6 spaces is what currently exists. Is that correct?
I see Tracy nodding her head. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So
and
that's okay. Sorry, that's the piece that I was missing. I wasn't sure if there were more spaces, and for some reason the request was for 6. Okay. So the reduction from 10 to 6 is based on our requirements, the math that we have to apply from the municipality's perspective. But 6 spaces is what currently exists, and so they're asking to maintain what's currently in place. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I do have one follow-up question. Is related to our ongoing conversation about housing affordability and affordable housing. Do our requirements apply in this case, or because it's a renovation, they do not have to meet the same intended standard that we would apply to new developments?
So certainly it is a conversion and it is intensification. So they do have to speak to our affordability policies. Maybe Ms. Sander can speak to just the development in general in regards to providing an alternative housing type within the downtown.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may pass that on to the applicants who might want to speak to their intended tenants, and if they want to speak to the price point and how that would kind of meet an affordable target for the community, if that's okay. So I don't know, Peter or Timo, if one of you want to speak to that, if that's okay with the chair.
Yep, absolutely. Either one or both, if they wish to. Mr. Twilley.
Yeah, do you hear me okay?
Yep.
I think talking to Tracy a little bit before about that, but I think there'll be like if it's needed that it's affordable housing. I don't know. I do quite a bit of work in the city of Ottawa with some affordable housing, and it's not always the best clientele you have. So I guess maybe you could tell me a little more about what affordable housing means to you, or what you're looking for.
Certainly. Director Martin?
So affordable housing, as defined by the provincial policy statement and our official plan, is it's a calculation of a rate as to what is applied compared to average market rents. So it's offering rent at a lower rate than what the average market rent is for the area, and it's also based off of there's thresholds in regards to just a certain income level associated with what that affordability piece means. So typically it's that 30% of an individual's salary, income, you cannot exceed on the housing piece in regards to shelter and the cost of shelter.
And that's calculated on a median income level according to StatsCan in this community?
So there's two ways of calculating it. One, it's based on average rents within the area. And the other calculation is based on median income, and that's derived. There's two ways: one from average market rents from data taken from CMHC, as well as based on the housing tables that are published by the province on an annual basis. So that looks at income levels.
So the other calculation on market, the average market rent, it's 80%. We're looking for something that's 20% less. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's the standard that the county uses, and that's the standard that we've adopted through the affordable housing strategy.
And we have a goal of 25% is a goal that we're trying to reach. So in this case, that would be one and a half.
One unit.
One unit. So it's not prescriptive, but that's where we're at, Mr. Twilley, in terms of affordability.
Do you know what that would be for a one-bedroom apartment in Kemptville?
I'm sorry, say again?
Do you know what that would be for a one-bedroom apartment in Kemptville? An affordable rate that you consider affordable housing?
Yeah, do we have that figure?
So based off of the provincial policy statement definition, it is around $950 for a one-bedroom apartment.
Okay, so we'd be like to have one apartment that is for affordable housing out of the 6 fall into that criteria, I guess.
That would be the goal. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's fine for us.
Ms. Zander, did you want to weigh in?
Sure, thank you. And this is likely going to come up on the other files tonight too. So perhaps just for my client's interest on this one, what's the township's kind of method to implement that? That will get written to the site plan agreement as a requirement, just so they'll understand how that requirement's going to play out. I think that's where it's going to go. Is that right?
Through you, Councillor Barkley, yes, that is the mechanism in which the municipality secures the affordable housing element.
Okay. Any other questions on that item? And I see Councillor O'Sullivan has a question. Go ahead, Councillor O'Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barkley. And a couple of questions then. So one unit would be designated affordable, and thank you, Councillor Stracher-Yan, for bringing that up. I had that question myself. The other question relates to the parking spots. I'm pleased that you addressed an accessible parking spot. So if I understood correctly, it was 6 outdoor parking spots plus 1 accessible, or 5 plus 1 that's accessible?
Through you, Councillor Barkley, to Councillor Sullivan, it's 5 plus 1.
Okay, thank you. The other thing that wasn't addressed though is bicycle parking. And if this building is in the Old Town Kemptville footprint, we are looking to have a bicycle friendly community. And so for active transportation, is bicycle parking part of the site plan for this development?
Ms. Zander?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, the applicants can speak, but I would think there is room on this site to accommodate bicycle parking, a bike rack or whatever the township's requirements are. So we can absolutely add that to the plan during the site plan, the detailed site plan stage, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. It is in the Old Town Kemptville footprint, is it not, Councillor Barkley?
Yes, it's right on the corner of Prescott and Clothier.
Yeah. Okay.
Right downtown. Before I turn it over to the general public, Amy, I'll ask my question, and that is, this building, does it have a heritage designation, and what does the bylaw stipulate? Is it strictly external items, or do we have any detail on that?
I would have to verify whether or not there's a designation on the property.
Okay.
That's implemented at the building permit stage. So if there is a designation on the property, any alterations that are done to the building would be addressed at that point in time when there's an application brought forward. But I can clarify as to whether or not the property is designated. Certainly it's on our inventory of just properties that have potential heritage interest, but I'm not certain if it's made its full way through the designation piece.
And if it did, there'd be a bylaw attached to it with a description of what is significant.
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Yeah. As I mean, more recently, we've had more properties come to the Heritage Committee. So we've gotten a little bit of practice at reviewing some of these, requests for when there's changes or alterations. So certainly the bylaw would be prescriptive.
I'm sure Ms. Sander would like to see that if there is one. So, but maybe you can get back to her.
I'm just sorry, it's Councillor Barkley.
Yeah, go ahead.
The staff have just messaged me to confirm it is not designated.
Okay.
The one benefit for Debbie sticking around at my meetings is she can do the background research for me while I'm in the meeting. So
Great. Well, okay, that's good. That eliminates that obstacle. Councillor Strakoyan, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Councillor Barkley. The question I think was partially answered. I think Ms. Zander already brought it up regarding when the definition of how many units would be affordable, that comes up within the site plan agreement, correct? And so the timing of that is yet to come. So there's nothing required at this stage to capture that aspect of things, right? Because this is we're dealing with something separate at this stage, correct?
Through you, Councillor
Yes,
Barkley.
go ahead, Ms. Martin.
To Councillor Strakoyan. Yes, so the site plan is a separate process under which that would be developed. And so typically, especially with these infill residential lots, where we're seeing intensification, it's more so for the confirmation of the parking and just guaranteeing the spots. But certainly that's the mechanism that we have to enter into agreements that would stipulate those requirements.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor O'Sullivan.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Barkley. I just wondered how many of the units will be accessible of the 6 units? Is there going to be an elevator in the building, or how many of the units will be accessible, please?
Mr. Chair, I may need to let Peter speak to that.
Okay.
There's definitely some upper floor units, and I don't think there's an elevator, so we'll have to just confirm how many units are on the ground floor.
Mr. Twilley?
Yeah, there's no elevator and we don't have any, those things are all still to be determined. This is step 1, so we'll figure that out as it goes.
Yeah, that might be a question, Councillor O'Sullivan, for the next stage in this whole process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I expect we will have a couple at least, but it's hard to say right now off the bat.
Understood. Great, thanks. Any other questions from council? Okay, seeing none. We'll now hear of questions or comments from members of the public who wish to comment either for or against the proposal. Following any comments from the public, the applicant will be offered the opportunity to respond to questions raised. All persons wishing to address the proposal will ask questions through the chair. Please state your name and address and postal code prior to responding. Please be advised that any member of the public who should wish to provide written comment during the proposed bylaw amendment can still do so after the public meeting is adjourned. Written comment can be received up until the bylaw amendment is considered by council. It is intended council will consider the bylaw amendment after the public meeting. Council members may also, well, you've already had your chance to ask questions, so I won't read that part. So the public meeting is now open. Is there anyone there wishing to speak for or against adoption of this zoning bylaw amendment? Okay, seeing none. So we'll go on, and I need a mover and a seconder for the following. Be it resolved that council approve and enact bylaw 54-22 to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw 50-12 to rezone the property located at 405 Prescott, not 405 Prescott Street, sorry. We're talking about 5 Clothier Street West, 5 Clothier Street West. Oh, bear with me here.
I think that's
I'm on the wrong page.
53-22.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Let me find the appropriate resolution here. 53-22. There we go. Okay, I'll read this again. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for the following. Be it resolved that council approve and enact bylaw 53-22 to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw 50-12 to rezone the property located at 5 Clothier Street from residential first density R1 to downtown commercial exception C1-13. I'm looking for a mover on that, please. Councillor Straker-Yan and seconder, Councillor O'Sullivan. I'll call the question. All in favor? Great. So that's carried. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you, Councillor O'Sullivan, for getting me on the right page. And now we just slide in to the next public meeting. Do we have to adjourn this one?
My apologies. If you could just advise that the public meeting is now closed at 7:28 p.m.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm now advising you that the public meeting is, and I have to find the page again, excuse me, is over at 7:27 p.m.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Onwards. Council will now hold a virtual public meeting to consider an application to amend the zoning on the lands located at 405 Prescott Street from residential fourth density R4 to residential fourth density exception R4-14. Please be advised that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If an applicant does not provide oral comments, if an appellant does not provide oral comments at this public meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the local planning appeal tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any persons who wish further notice of the council's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to the Director of Planning and Development, Amy Martin, via email following adjournment of this public meeting. Contact information can be found on the notice of public meeting and will be provided at the end of the presentation. Anyone wishing to ask a question during the public meeting can do so by clicking the raise hand option in the meeting on the Zoom dashboard. When asking a question, please identify yourself and provide your address and postal code for the clerk to record as part of the public record. Are there people here for this public meeting? Can you raise your hand or identify yourself? Mr. McMullen is here. Amanda Gould is here. Anybody else? Oh, of course, Tracy Zander, thank you. It's your evening tonight, Ms. Zander. And I'll now pass the meeting over to the Director of Planning and Development, Amy Martin. Go ahead, Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Councilor Barkley. Our second zoning amendment being considered tonight is for 405 Prescott Street. Next slide, please. The property is located within our downtown, so south of Mary Street and north of Van Buren on the east side of Prescott. It's currently developed with a multi-residential building. Next slide, please. And you can just see from the aerial, just the existing development on the property. Next slide, please. Similar to our previous application, there's a bit of a theme in tonight's public meetings. So the property is designated downtown commercial. The current zoning is residential fourth density, and it's currently being used as a 4-unit multi-residential development. The property is 0.23 acres in size, and surrounding land uses include low density residential and downtown commercial. Next slide, please. So the proposal for this property is to build a proposed 2-story 2-unit dwelling, so essentially an additional duplex on the property. In order to accommodate the duplex, some deviations are required in regards to the zoning. So we're creating a site-specific zone for this property to recognize a reduced interior setback to the property on the south side. There's the provision for parking, so the parking spaces can be met. The issue is the setback distances from a property line as well as from a habitable window in regards to the 2-story dwelling unit. Next slide, please. So the provincial policy statement, as stated before, policies are very similar to the last application we considered. Again, the healthy, livable, and safe communities are sustained by promoting efficient development and land use patterns. Our settlement areas are to be the focus of growth and development, and new development is encouraged near existing built-up areas and should be in compact form, mixed use, and densities that allow for the efficient use of land. Next slide, please. So the the United Counties official plan, very similar policies apply in regards to encouraging our settlement areas to be our centers for growth and development and urban activities, as well as encouraging local municipalities to focus on the development of affordable housing in our urban settlement areas, which provides the greatest opportunity for a range of housing forms, types, and tenures. So certainly this application, building on the existing multi-tenant building that's on the property, will provide another form of housing through that the creation of that duplex. Next slide, please. As for our own official plan, similar policies on the growth management side, we do encourage infill and residential intensification as a priority in our existing serviced area. So again, we're taking a property and a portion of the property that's not overly being utilized to allow for the creation of 2 additional units. We also have policies within our downtown commercial to encourage the growth of our residential population in the downtown. Next slide, please. Again, so the section 10.3.5 provides that accessory residential uses and multiple unit residential developments are permitted and shall generally be located to the rear and upper stories of the building. So in this case, they're not touching the existing residential unit in the front. But they're adding it at the rear of the property. So that's where we do encourage the units. So should that building in the front ever be redeveloped, consideration could be given for that commercial component in the future. But this application is considering an additional structure to support that residential use. Section 10.3.8 notes that the efficient utilization of land and buildings within the downtown will be encouraged through the development of vacant or underutilized land and functionally obsolete buildings, and the rehabilitation where feasible of buildings that are functionally viable but substandard and required improvements in appearance and their condition. So in this case, we're looking at the redevelopment of the rear of the lot where there is some space to accommodate another structure. Next slide, please. So the proposed amendment will address some very site-specific requirements for the proposed the parking area associated for the development, but as well as for the location of the structure itself. So to allow for that, the zoning would need to recognize that we permit up to 2 dwellings on the lot to allow for that duplex use, reducing the minimum interior side yard setback from 6 meters to 3.6 meters, a minimum dwelling unit size of 62 square meters. Our standard is 65, so just a 3-meter reduction, again trying to create that smaller unit type on the property, and then permitting a maximum density of 1 dwelling unit per 153 square meters. So we are providing higher density on the lot. Minimum setback to a parking area shall be 0.5 meters. Minimum setback from a parking space to a habitable window shall be 5.5 meters, and the minimum setback from a driveway to a habitable window shall be 0.9 meters. So within the planning report, this was all broken down, which explained the provisions that are in place. So in regards to parking, section 6.35 of the zoning bylaw provides that there has to be certain setback requirements. So in order to accommodate, because we are dealing with an existing developed site, there are some deviations from the parking standards as well as setbacks that are required. Next slide, please. So we received no objections from the Rideau Valley or from the health unit. This is a serviced area, but the health unit does just review applications to ensure that it's not within their scope or mandate. So when the report was submitted at that time, we hadn't received public comments, but we did have a neighbor reach out to the municipality and met with staff and provided some comments in regards to the proposed development, and they've requested, as part of the development, the site plan process, if there's a potential for a fence along a shared property line. That has been shared with the applicants, and it is my understanding that there is agreement to work with the neighbor just to address the fence issue, and the intent and the purpose is to just delineate where the property line is. Just concerns over ensuring that it is known where that shared line is. So to that end, no other further comments were received by staff other than the neighbor looking to seek some a bit of a buffer in that fence provision. And to that end, that will end my formal presentation. It is staff's recommendation that we do support the zoning bylaw amendment to permit the addition of that duplex structure to create the additional 2 residential units on the property.
Great. Thank you, Director Martin. And as we did in the last public meeting, I'll open the floor to council if they have questions of yourself or I guess Ms. Sander and the applicant. Are there any questions from my council colleagues? Councillor Starkey, yeah.
I would say ditto from the last meeting regarding the affordable housing piece. And I think probably hear something similar from Councillor O'Sullivan on some of her points. So I think that still needs to be a consideration. Obviously, in this case, it's 2. So I'm not sure what the math works out to if it doesn't matter because 1 is half, it's not 25%. So, but I think I think that is worth mentioning anyway. The other, I guess the question that I have, just looking at the layout here. So, we're talking about adding another building in there. So taking up where people, I guess, based on the satellite imagery, sort of pushing the parking to the back of the property, vice where it is right now, which is sort of in the paved area immediately behind this building, just from what I can gather from the images. When we look at the allowances for parking and so on, I understand the distances from property lines and from buildings and windows and so on. Does this consider snow removal in the winter? Like, is there actually space to remove the snow? It looks like it's getting tighter. I mean, it's hard to judge here exactly. I know folks who do that professionally can remove snow from very small spaces, so maybe it's not an issue. But I'm just wondering if our, when we're looking at the numbers, is that a consideration to the overall plan that needs to be factored in separately, or is it built in already?
So, Councillor Barclay, if I may address that question, and I will whether the if the applicant or the property owner wants to speak to snow removal from a process perspective, the municipality, that's a consideration at site plan. They have to demonstrate how snow storage is being handled on the site, and certainly one of the recommendations in certain sites we've seen is that the snow is essentially plowed and removed on the property. We do also have provisions in the site plan that requires where, obviously, I mean, we live in Canada, we have a lot of snow and snowbanks start to pile up, but where it starts to become a hindrance or an impediment to the site, it needs to be removed and trucked elsewhere. And again, that's much more of a safety and vehicular movement. But I don't know if Ms. Sander maybe wants to speak to that, but I just wanted to certainly say that it is a consideration at the site plan process. They'll have to demonstrate how snow storage will be handled as part of that process.
And drainage, obviously.
Yes, that is correct. And grading and drainage is also an item that's dealt with as well at the building code stage. So I'm sorry, building permit for our urban developments, a grading and a lot grading plan and a drainage plan are provided.
Ms. Sander, did you want to add anything further to what Director Martin said?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. That's exactly what I was going to say. We're going to expand, relocate the parking. So that would be dealt with at the site plan stage, including dealing with snow removal or storage on the site. Yeah.
Before I go to Councillor O'Sullivan, I must say I'm encouraged to see some of this infill coming forward, and the fact that, in December we did change our policies in terms of additional dwellings, and seeing more residents downtown is in my mind a key to revitalizing downtown. So this is nice to see.
Councillor Barclay, just before you move on, if I may, a comment that I just wanted to make, not another question, but the infill is one aspect of it, but also, given the last one as well, it's looking at using the space that we already have, as well as reusing existing structures. I think that that's an important part too. We're not just talking about building building new from scratch. So I think this is these two are very promising in my mind as well. Thank you.
There is a new build though.
In this one, there is, but it's sort of the combination of those two things is sort of what I was getting at. But I thank you. Yeah.
Great. Okay, sorry, Councillor O'Sullivan, you've been very patient. Go ahead.
That's okay. Thank you. My same questions would be referring to active transportation considerations regarding bike racks and parking. Is this considered in the Old Town footprint too? Yes. Okay. I wasn't sure. On the other side of Van Buren, it is. Oh no, it is.
No, this is right across from St. John's United.
Yes.
It's not within the BIA footprint, but it's definitely Old Town Kemptville.
Old Town Kemptville. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. And then just another minor thing in the document referring to this one under key findings, that all relates to the property at number 5 Clothier. It doesn't relate to this property at 405.
Apologies, Councillor O'Sullivan. It's when using templates, that was missed. I do apologize, but I will be sending a revised report to Tracy, just properly noting the property and the proper key findings. That was an oversight on my part.
Okay, no worries. So the current structure that's there, how many units are in there?
4.
4, and then the proposed new one has 2 more. So like a semi-detached built behind the first one. Okay, so that's 6 dwellings then on the one property. So certainly I think good use of infill land that's available, and thank you very much.
Any other questions from council? No? Okay, now we can hear from the applicant, followed by questions or comments from members of the public who wish to either comment for or against the proposal. Following any comments from the public, the applicant will be offered an opportunity to respond to questions raised. All persons wishing to address the proposal will ask their questions through the chair. Please state your name, address, and postal code prior to your question or comment. Please be advised that any member of the public who should wish to provide written comment regarding the proposed bylaw amendment can still do so after the public meeting is adjourned. Written comment can be received up until the bylaw amendment is considered by council. It is intended council will consider the bylaw amendment after the public meeting. Council members, well, we've already dealt with council members. So, Mr. McMullen, are you speaking? Are you the applicant?
I am the applicant, yes.
Yeah. The floor is yours if you want to make any comments.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that got some feedback on this. That we have had a lot of inquiries for rental units in the Kemptville area. We recently rented one of our units, and we had 1,200 inquiries for the unit. So it shows that there's obviously a deficit of rental accommodation in downtown Kemptville. So.
Absolutely, we need more rental units and affordable units as well. But prior to that, maybe more units will help settle the marketplace a little bit and bring those rents down. And
I think as also was indicated, myself and my 2 partners are more than willing to work with any of the neighbors to accommodate any concerns or issues they have relative to the development of the site.
That's great. Great. We encourage good neighborly behavior for sure.
Yeah, no, that's all part of being part of the community. We understand.
Super.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Sander, did you want to say anything about the application?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I think this is a really good intensification of this site. The parking can be accommodated on this particular site. And I wanted to note also that the required amenity space and play space can also be accommodated. So there is room for that outdoor living space to fit on this site. And as Mr. McMullen said, we've already spoken about Ms. Gould's request for fencing and kind of establishing the property line, and there's no issues with doing that. And certainly room to put some bike racks on this property for bike transportation. And we have already talked about the affordable housing intent in your municipality, and there's certainly an agreement to meet the township's targets for affordable housing here too. So I think this is a good reuse of this property or intensification of this property.
Great. I noticed that Amanda Gould is here. Is there anything you'd like to add, or if you want to unmute yourself, Ms. Gould? I'm happy to hear you. Oh, you don't have a mic. So possibly in the chat, Ms. Gould, you can enter your comments there.
While she's typing, Mr. Chair, my apologies. I had just heard that a neighbor had an interest in the fencing, and I assumed incorrectly that that was Ms. Gould. So it appears she's got other comments. Hopefully she can type, so perhaps we can answer.
Yeah, she does have access to the chat function. Oh, okay. And here it is. The concern that she's raising is the back of the property hosts an aggressive invasive plant that spreads rhizomes. I'm familiar with some of those. How close to the property lines will soil be distributed? Ms. Sander, do you have an answer?
Well, the parking configuration on our site plan, which I don't know if staff want to share again, but I think we're kind of a meter from the lot line with the parking area. So a fair bit of the rear lot line will be altered to accommodate the required parking.
Okay, Director Martin, is it possible for you to throw up that aerial shot of the plan?
I believe the clerk's department is working on getting the presentation back up.
Yeah, so that Ms. Gould can see sort of the layout and what's happening at the back of the property.
You just have to give us.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I think seeing the actual site plan drawing will clear up those concerns. Here we go.
Should I assume that we want to see the removal of that aggressive invasive plant and removing some soil is a good thing, or?
I would think invasive species. No.
Oh, she said no. Okay, you're gonna have to educate me a little bit because I'm not exactly.
Okay.
Sure.
Can we go to the section of the presentation that I guess it's the next slide? No, one previous. There we go. So from what I understand, and you can't see my cursor, can you? No. So the back of the property is at the top. Okay. According to Ms. Gould, it can only be controlled through herbicide. But if you'll notice, Ms. Gould, that the parking now is at the rear of the lot, and the setback is I forget what the setback is, but I imagine if those invasive plants are there, that some of them will be dug up. But you're, from what I understand, Ms. Gould, you're saying it can only be treated by herbicide. So that would be a request, I guess, when it comes back for site plan approval, is make sure that control of those invasive species is handling. Okay, all right. Well, let's consult with Ms. Gould about the right way to get rid of those invasive plants. She seems to have a lot of knowledge.
And Mr. Chair, one of the variations that's requested in the site-specific zone is that rear yard setback to 0.5 meters from the park for the parking space. So it would be half a meter from the rear lot line. I think I would suggest some consultation with Mr. McMullen that, they're happy to have that discussion with Ms. Gould. And I don't think it directly affects the zoning. We can try to figure out how to address it.
No, not at this meeting, but I'm sure when you come back later for site plan approval that there'll be another opportunity to ask about how you're going to get rid of those invasive species. So
I'm going to have to do some research on this one.
Yeah, well, I think the Ms. Gould, who I suspect is a neighbor that backs onto that property and is struggling with invasive plants, perhaps she can leave her email to the clerk or with Director Martin, and we can put you two together.
Good.
So,
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. no, thank you. Any other questions concerning this application? I'll give Ms. Gould a minute. Okay. All right. So I'm going to close this public meeting at 7:50. Okay. And we'll get to the resolution, and I'll look for a mover and a seconder. That be it resolved, council approve and enact bylaw 54-22 to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw 50-12 to rezone the property located at 405 Prescott Street from residential fourth density R4 to residential fourth density exception R4-14. So I'll be looking now for a mover for that resolution. Councillor Strakoyan, and a seconder. What happened to, oops, I'm on the wrong panel, sorry. Yes, Councillor O'Sullivan, sorry about that.
Okay.
I had the chat open and I buried you. Okay, Ms. Sander, did you want to say something before we carry this motion?
Sorry, if you don't mind, I wrote R4-14 for the motion on the previous application, and you've indicated R4-14 here too, and I just wanted to see if the numbering was correct or incorrect, or if I wrote it wrong.
Well, that's what I've got on this resolution, but maybe I'll defer to Director
Was the
Martin.
previous one R4-13?
It was C1, sorry, Tracy, it was C1-13.
Oh, very good.
So we're maintaining the residential fourth density zoning that pre-exists on the lot.
Okay,
yeah, I can concur that it was C1-13 for 5 Clothier Street West.
Great, thank
So
you.
this
Sorry
one,
to interrupt.
Oh, that's okay. So the motion as read has been moved and seconded. So I'll look for a vote on that. All in favor? Great. That's carried. Awesome. So on to our next meeting. Council will now hold a virtual public meeting, to consider an application to amend the official plan to permit a maximum density of 73 units per gross hectare for the property municipally known as 20-24 Asa Street. And I'm advising you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed official plan amendment. If an appellant does not provide oral comments at this public meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the local planning appeal tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any persons wishing to, who wish further notice, I get tripped over that all the time. Any persons who wish further notice of the council's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to the Director of Planning and Development, Amy Martin, via email following adjournment of this public meeting. Contact information can be found on the notice of public meeting and will be provided at the end of the presentation. Anyone wishing to ask a question during the public meeting can do so by clicking the raise hand option in the meeting, and that's on your Zoom menu. When asking a question, please identify yourself and provide your address and postal code for the clerk to record as part of the public record. Are there people here for this public meeting? David Howard, Tracy Sander, of course. Okay. I'll now pass it over to the Director of Planning and Development, Amy Martin. Thank you very much. Amy.
Thank you, Councillor Barkley. So tonight before council is the consideration for official plan amendment number 8. It's for 2024 Asa Street. Next slide, please. So the municipality has received a site-specific official plan amendment requesting to permit an increased maximum density for the property at 20-24 Asa Street to 73 units per gross hectare. So the official plan is a requirement so the official plan amendment is required prior to the property owner applying for a severance application to sever off a portion of the property. So the severance would create the opportunity for an infill single family dwelling should the official plan amendment be supported. So what will happen is when they go to apply for the severance, the retained lot with the existing multi-residential unit building on it would exceed the municipality's density requirements for the residential designation. So an official plan amendment is required ahead of that request for a severance application in order to ensure that the retained lot it meets and conforms to the policies of our official plan. Next slide, please. So the property is located at the intersection of Thomas and Asa Street. As you can see, there is the area in behind the existing units at 2024 Asa Street. You unfortunately won't be able to see my mouse, but I do believe we have a slide showing what's proposed to be severed is the larger area at the back that is vacant. Next slide, please. So here's the proposed severance. So the lot would sever off a portion of the area to the south of the property, so it would be considered at the rear of that existing multi-residential unit, and the proposal would be for a single detached dwelling on that lot. Next slide, please. So as for our policy considerations in the provincial in regards to the provincial policy statement, which again is the overarching policy document at the provincial level, our healthy, livable, and safe communities are sustained by accommodating an appropriate mixed range of housing and mixed range of residential types. Housing policies within the provincial policy statement requires planning authority to provide an appropriate range and mix of housing options and densities to meet projected market-based and affordable housing needs of current and future residences for the regional market area. And that's done by establishing minimum targets in regards to the provision of affordable, low and moderate income households, which aligns with applicable housing and homelessness plans. Next slide, please. So the county's official plan provides policy direction to support the creation of affordable housing, and the county's further establishes that housing that is affordable and accessible to low and moderate income households is a priority. So in this case, we're maintaining existing rental units within North Grenville. So again, providing more options on the rental unit side. The counties and local municipalities will encourage proponents and developments where appropriate to ensure that a portion of new housing is affordable and available and accessible to a broader range of demographics and the population, including younger workers and families, lower income seniors and renters, and that an adequate supply is maintained. So the proposal is still going to maintain those residential units on the property. We're not losing them through the redevelopment process. What will the official plan is setting the stage for is that future severance of the land to the south that would permit the single family dwelling to be constructed. Next slide, please. In our own official plan, we do have policies in regards to maximum density. So what's triggered the official plan amendment is that where we have a density greater than 61 units per gross hectare, we require an official plan amendment. So an official plan amendment is before council this evening for their consideration. Next slide, please. So the proposed amendment to the official plan is as provided here on the screen this evening. Notwithstanding the increased height and density provisions of section 14.2C of the official plan, the land described as 20 to 24 Asa Street, Plan 11, Block 10, part of Block 10 and 11, geographic town of Kemptville shall be permitted an increased density to 73 units per gross hectare as established through a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. So in regards to the public consultation process, we have the United Counties were pre-consulted on the draft official plan amendment. So in regards to the process, council will consider and pass the bylaw before them this evening, which is then sent on to the United Counties, and the manager of planning services is the approval authority. So as part of that process, she collects the comments that we received as part of the planning process and all the documentation that supports an official plan amendment, and she'll make a recommendation as to whether it is adopted by the counties and into our official plan. Notification of the public meeting was circulated in accordance with the Planning Act, We received no objections from public bodies. We did receive an inquiry about the proposed development for the severed lot, and we've also received an email of concern from a resident in regards to the proposed redevelopment of the property, which was circulated through to council for their consideration ahead of the application being considered this evening. And the concern was in relation to the loss of amenity space for the residents of the existing building as a result of the future severance that is still forthcoming, and as a result of the development of that single attached dwelling. So that space is currently being used by the residents, and that will be lost through this redevelopment application. Next slide, please. So to staff's recommendation that council adopts the official plan amendment number 8 to permit the increase in the maximum density for 20 to 24 Asa Street to that of 73 units per gross hectare. And as noted, the merits of a severance application are not being considered this evening as part of the official plan amendment. That will come under a separate application that's made to the United Counties, and there'll be additional opportunity to provide input through the severance application, and any future amendments in regards to the zoning, where if there's any standards that have to be addressed through that redevelopment process, whether it's on the property for the single detached dwelling or on the retained lot, which would be proposed as part of that severance process, a zoning amendment would be brought forward at a later date to address those. And that ends the formal presentation on the part of municipal staff. Certainly, if Ms. Zander has anything else she'd like to add to the official plan amendment as the agent on file. Otherwise, I will take questions from members of council, followed by members of the public.
Sorry, Amy. I think what I'd like to do in this case is hear from Ms. Zander and anyone who wants to speak regarding the application. Then we'll go back to council afterwards. But before we go to Ms. Zander, just a clarification for me. If council approves this official plan amendment, the approving body is the counties. So it goes from us to the counties, and only if they approve the official plan amendment that we're proposing would it then set the stage for the applicant to come back with a severance request. And if the severance request was issued, a lot of ifs here, they would have to come back to us with a site plan. Is that correct?
So typically, Councilor Barkley, for infill development, a minor site plan, we may require just for the confirmation of the lot grading and drainage. That's typically what we for infill projects. It is a policy of the official plan that we can require site plan control to address those elements.
But would it also not address amenity space?
So that would have to be addressed when the property comes forward from a severance proposal. Staff will be looking for a more fulsome site plan as to how both the retained and the proposed severed property will meet the policy intent of our zoning bylaw. At that time, if there is any where any of the performance standards within the zoning provisions aren't met, a zoning amendment would have to come forward to address those. Okay. So it will depend on, at the end of the day, how that, when they bring forward the severance application, where that proposed lot line is going to be drawn, and what's the impact on the provisions in regard to amenity space as well as setbacks.
Okay. So now I'm going to read part of this wonderful 3 paragraphs before we go to Ms. Zander. Council will now hear from the applicant, followed by questions or comments from members of the public who wish to comment either for or against the proposal. Following any comments from the public, the applicant will be offered an opportunity to respond to the questions raised. All persons wishing to address the proposal will ask their questions through the chair. Please state your name, address, and postal code prior to asking your questions. Please be advised that any member of the public who should wish to provide written comment regarding the proposed official plan amendment can still do so after the public meeting is adjourned. Written comment can be received up until the plan amendment is considered by council. It is intended council will consider the plan amendment after the public meeting. Council members may also wish to ask questions through the chair to those making presentations. So I'll open the floor to the applicant and Ms. Zander. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, just a little bit more clarification. The property has a residential building on it with 5 units, and there are 5 parking spaces associated with that building. The goal is to create a new lot, which would face to Thomas Street, so an infill lot that could accommodate a single detached dwelling. So that's infill intensification, kind of a good use of land. The impact of severing off that lot is that the smaller lot that has the multiple residential building on it would no longer comply with your density policies in your official plan. In fact, I don't think it quite complies right now, but it's going to get a little bit worse in terms of density compliance. But in practical terms, the 5-unit building is going to continue as a 5-unit building. The parking will not be affected by the severance. So functionally, 5 apartment units are there and 5 apartment units will continue. A slightly smaller lot, which would allow the infill of another single dwelling. So it's a kind of a funny request that the density or what would be the retained lot from a severance has to be addressed by council first before we can file the consent application to create the new lot. Because I can't file a consent application that would contravene your official plan. That's not allowed. This is a kind of a funny one. We've actually prepared the severance application, the consent application, so we can show the size of the lot that's being proposed, of course, and then the retained is what's left, and that is what's the subject of your official plan amendment. So the township needs to consider the official plan amendment for the density first before the severance can be processed. Hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, the intent is one infill lot that would accommodate a single dwelling. And as Amy said, assuming that the density request is supported, we would need to ensure zoning compliance as part of the mapping out the new building and the building on the retained lot. And if exceptions are needed to the zoning bylaw, that's either a zoning amendment or perhaps a minor variance. But the first question is really, are you open to the density impact of the density here should the severance move forward? So I'm happy to answer questions, and Mr. Howard is here as well. Thank you.
Mr. Howard, are you the applicant? Your mic, we can't hear you.
We still can't hear you. You may have to actually unplug your headset, try plugging it back in, or speaking without your headset. Unfortunately, we still can't hear you.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you
Oh,
now.
excellent. Magic of technology.
Yeah, we struggle with it.
Yes, I'm the applicant. The property is actually held in the name of my corporation, but it's a holding company, basically.
Okay. I notice there are other people here at this meeting. Is there anyone else who wants to speak to this particular application? You can either raise your hand or unmute yourself. Okay, seeing none. Ms. Sander, did you get a copy of the email that was distributed to council regarding amenity space?
I did not.
Okay. All right. Do you, Amy, I don't recall who wrote that letter. You don't see them here at this meeting?
They are present at the meeting, but certainly I will leave it up to that individual if they want to speak to their letter. I will share the email correspondence, just the comments that staff received with Ms. Sander and with Mr. Howard for their consideration, and it'll be something they'll have to address as part of the severance application.
Okay. All right. So there'll be a chance to address it should it come up again. All right, so I'll open up the floor now to my council colleagues. Thank you for being patient. Are there any questions from council? Councillor O'Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barkley, and through you to Director Martin, or perhaps Ms. Sander. I can't actually see the overhead, the aerial view on my iPad. But anyway, so I do have a question regarding how much space is there now behind the one-story shed to the proposed property line?
Can we flip to the next slide, please? That might be a better, more
Yeah,
detailed.
that one. I can't actually read the numbers on there for the new lot line.
I'm just gonna pull it up on my screen, unless Miss Sandra, you have, if you know the number off the top of your head. I'm just pulling it up on my screen right now. So I can zoom in a little more because I don't have care and control of the slide deck. 2 seconds. So one nice thing about being virtual is access to your whole slew of files.
Just when I try to enlarge it myself,
yeah,
then it gets blurry and I can't. Yeah, so. It's certainly not less than the minimum, right? There's no variance required. It meets the standard setbacks. Setbacks.
So in regards to the proposed, from a severance perspective, one of the requirements is a condition of a severance that we get a copy of the draft plan survey for the proposed lot. That way we can verify it against the zoning standards.
Okay.
In reviewing the version I have, and Debbie's, if I can get a clearer number that's not as clear on the physical drawing, it looks like from the rear of the back house is to the proposed property line is going to be about 15 or 16 feet. That's from the back of that one-story shed. And then the proposed lot is at 12 meters. So certainly a variance or a zoning will be a consideration in that our minimum zoning standard for lot frontage is 15 meters for a single detached dwelling. But again, certainly this is a conceptual plan at this point. So once we have that draft plan of survey, we'll know for certain what how the proposed development or the proposed severance will perform against our zoning standards for a residential lot. I believe from an area perspective, it wasn't an issue or concern because it is the depth of that lot will provide a sufficient amount of area to support a single detached dwelling based off the concept plan.
Thank you. So one other, I think I have grandkids knocking on my front window. So another question then, from the aerial view, it looks like there's quite a lot of green space on the left side of the lot. So I think I'm on a meeting. Anyway, I'm sorry. On the left side of the lot, there looks like there's a large amount of green space that will not be affected by this severance, correct?
So the space to the what would be considered the west side of the existing development wouldn't be included as part of the severance.
Okay, so there's still a large amount of green space left. Okay.
Yeah, there's still some amenity space that will be confirmed as to how much amenity space, and if it meets our zoning standards at the it'd be a requirement of the severance stage to confirm that.
Okay, all right, thank you. Those are my questions. Thanks a lot. And I apologize for the kiddo.
It's all, we all have challenges, Mr. Sullivan. I have people making coffee here with grinding their beans. Any other questions from members of council? No? Okay, well then I will call this public meeting closed at 8:14 p.m. And I'll go and again, I'll be looking for a mover and a seconder for the following resolution. Be it resolved that council approve and enact bylaw 55-22 to amend the official plan to permit a maximum density of 73 units per gross hectare for the property municipally known as 2022 Asa Street. So I'm looking for a mover, please. Councillor O'Sullivan, and a seconder? No, oh, okay. Councillor Strahan, thank you. And I'll call the question. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Thanks very much. The next item we have on the agenda regards something that was at a previous planning meeting, and that's zoning bylaw amendment 20-22 for 210 Van Buren. Ms. Martin, would you like to give us a refresher on that item?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Barkley. I did prepare a brief presentation about some of the changes that have happened. I do note that Mr. Demchak is here. If you recall, he is the agent on file for the application. He is the planner. So if we'll just pull up the presentation, I'll just take council through a walkthrough as to the some of the items that have been addressed since our public meeting back in May. Next slide, please. Just a refresher where the property is located, just on the south side of Van Buren. And the closest intersection is with Joseph Street, just there to the west. Next slide, please. So just a bit of background, council deferred their decision on the zoning and bylaw amendment on May 11th of 2022. There are three main areas of concerns that were raised by the neighbors: the butternut trees on the property, the location of the garbage room, and traffic and pedestrian connectivity. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so some of the steps that have been taken to address some of these concerns is in regards to the garbage room located on the property has been relocated internal to the site. So the only building that will be located within proximity to the residents on Van Buren Street is going to be the water meter room. So the impact from that, it's a water meter room, so there shouldn't be any concerns over what a garbage room would present compared to a meter room. So that's something that the developer was very quick to address on the site plan, as to being able to relocate that internal to the site to reduce that land use conflict with the neighboring property owners. The butternut trees, as mentioned in the initial public meeting, they are infected with the butternut canker, and through the consultation with the Ministry of Natural Resources, it was determined that the trees were not eligible to be protected as a species at risk. So certainly the developer has undertaken the appropriate studies to address the species at risk on the property and confer with the ministry as to how to address it. Next slide, please. The biggest issue that was raised and was quite the focus of the public meeting was in regard to traffic and into pedestrian connectivity. So a traffic impact study was provided as part of the zoning submission, and the study determined that development did not warrant any signalization or further improvements to support the vehicular traffic from the proposed development onto Van Buren Street. So I really want to highlight the fact that the zoning is the first step in this process, and that we do have a plan of subdivision and plan of condominium to come forward to address the allowance for those 50 townhouse units to be constructed. It's at that stage that the municipality has more of an ability to work with the developer to address concerns, especially on the pedestrian connectivity side, as to how we can create better linkages within the area and work to address some of the neighborhood concerns. Since the public meeting, I've had multiple discussions with Director Dunlop on the public works side, and we're in process of setting up a meeting with United Counties to discuss this, the south side of Van Buren Street, where there is no sidewalk, as to what would the county be supportive of in regards to pedestrian infrastructure within the right of way. I do note that Van Buren is an undersized road, according to Director Dunlop. It is about a 40-meter right of way, which is not the typical road width for a county road, but certainly we're open to those discussions as to how we can support better pedestrian connectivity and having those discussions with the developer at the plan of subdivision and plan of condominium stage, where we're able to negotiate a little more and require certain conditions, draft conditions for that plan of subdivision, and enter into an agreements at the end of the day. So it is proposed that, through the next phase of the development approvals process, that staff will work with both the developer and the United Counties to address the pedestrian connectivity along the south side of Van Buren Street to create better conditions where we can to support just the pedestrian movement in the area. I do note the site itself has sidewalks and pedestrian connectivity considerations. So certainly building off of their internal network, external, to help with moving around the site, because it is anticipated that the residents just won't stay within the development. Surely being so close in proximity to the downtown, they as well will be looking for opportunities to walk and take alternative forms of transportation other than driving. Next slide, please. So it is staff's recommendation that ZBA 20-21 to rezone the property at 210 Van Buren from the industrial to residential third density exception zone be supported. And as mentioned, this is the start of the process. We still have more planning approvals to work through, and that the consideration around the traffic and pedestrian connectivity will be further discussed with the developer as part of that process. So that ends just my formal presentation. I do note this is not a public meeting, but if there's any questions for Mr. Demchak, he's here to answer in relation to the project on the developer side.
Yeah, thank you, Director Martin. And I do know that we got ahead of ourselves a little bit because we wanted a bit more discussion, and that was the reason we deferred this meeting. But I do note that further questions can be asked at the plan of subdivision, plan of condominium. And normally we would entertain questions from the public at the end of a council meeting, but we've got a few more items to get through. So I think I would open the floor to people who want to speak again, if they're here, to this application. Otherwise, I will call the question. But Mr. Demchak, is there anything else you'd like to add to what Ms. Martin has said? And thank you very much for both of you for working on this file a little bit more and increasing our level of comfort. Go ahead, Mr. Demchak, and then I'll recognize Councillor Stark.
Sure, thank you, Councillor. If I could briefly just share my screen. I don't have, I don't know if I can share it.
I think we can give you permission to do that. Are we able to give Mr. Demchak? Yeah, we are.
Yep, you'll just have to give us 1 minute. Let me go ahead and do that.
Okay. Thank you. If everyone can see my screen right now.
Can't actually. No.
Let's try again. Sorry.
No worries.
It doesn't want to work on me.
Was it something that you provided to clerks that we can draw up for you?
No, I can just perhaps just quickly narrate it. It's not critical, but just for the benefit of council. And I just want to specifically comment on the garbage room relocation. So my client went back to his garbage consultant. So we were able to enlarge that garbage room that exists internal to the site, and then as well as look at a different garbage system, which are known as earth bins. So it's a larger system, and it allows for basically more storage in a smaller fashion. And so it removed that garbage room that was located adjacent to the residential properties on the north of our site. So now in that location, all exists is the existing water meter room that was originally planned, and no garbage room. I just wanted to provide that quick benefit for council.
Great, thank you. I think this council is familiar with that type of garbage system because it showed up at a development on Jack Street, I think.
Okay.
Councillor O'Sullivan, sorry, Councillor Starkian, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. This is for Director Martin, and I'm trying to recall something from our previous discussion. I recall a discussion regarding the number of units on the property and whether or not approval at this stage would limit us to that number exactly. It's not, unfortunately, it's not recorded in the minutes, and I haven't had a chance to review the video from that. But I believe that was raised as one of the points regarding, I guess, the number of dwellings per hectare or something along those lines. I don't know if this is helpful at all, if you recall any of that conversation.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Strickland. I think the confusion is in just the way that the resolution was worded. It's just the zoning will facilitate the creation of the 50 units. I mean, certainly based on the proposed layout, trying to fit more units on there from a townhouse perspective is will get challenging, but they're certainly within our density requirements. That wasn't a concern. So to that end, I believe part of the confusion is just in the way that the resolution was worded. The zoning provides just the standards that would support those 50 units being constructed.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
I'll open the floor now to any members of the public who want to speak to this particular item. Is anyone there here that would like to speak to it? No, not seeing anybody. Okay, I'll move on to read the.
And you're on mute, Councillor Barkley.
Okay, did I mute myself? Okay, so let me open the floor again. I might have accidentally muted myself, but so I'm opening the floor to members of the public who want to speak to this particular item. Normally they would speak at the end of the council meeting, but I note there are some members of the public here and I'm not sure if they have any questions. Before I go to Councillor O'Sullivan, who's got one. None? Okay. Councillor O'Sullivan. Oh, there we go. Do you mind waiting, Councillor O'Sullivan? I just see, and could you identify yourself, Katie?
Well, yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you give your name, address, postal code?
Yeah,
all that
Katie
good stuff?
Nolan,
Yeah.
206 Van Buren, postal code is K0G1J0. I just wanted to ask about fencing. I note that Mr. Demchuk has referred to the relocation of the garbage facility, and that's great. I just wondered if there was any change to the plan for fencing on that side that is adjacent to the residence on Van Buren.
Mr. Demchuk?
Sure. So through you, Mr. Chair, as part of this development, the details for fencing will obviously come out as part of our future plan of subdivision and the associated agreement. However, for these types of projects, what my client typically does is like a new board-on-board fencing, basically surrounding the property, and specifically that would abut the residence property at 206 Van Buren as well.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions before I go to Councillor O'Sullivan? No? Great. Councillor O'Sullivan.
Sorry, my question was about whether or not it is condominiums or freehold townhouses, because it said through a plan of subdivision slash plan of condominiums, and then the recommendation is 50 townhouse dwelling units. So I don't know, are they freehold or are they condominiums?
Thank you.
Mr. Demchuk, yeah, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the individual units for the townhomes will be freehold units. However, they will be provided on a condominium road. So the only portion of the project that will be have a common condominium element will be the condominium roads, as well as there is some amenity space that's associated with the project, and obviously private garbage pickup. However, the actual land for each unit and the unit itself will be freehold.
Great.
Thank you very much.
You're muted, Councillor Barkley.
Oh, I've got the old on-off switch reversed there. Yeah, thank you, Director Martin. So I see no other questions. I'm going to get to the resolution in front of me here. Looking for a mover and a seconder. Be it resolved that Council approve and enact bylaw 43-22 to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw 50-12 to rezone the property legally described as Plan 11, part plot revised, W.J. McDonald block, part lot 4 to part lot 12, being parts 4 to 8 on reference plan 15R7876 from industrial M to residential third density special exemption R3-24 zone to permit 50 residential townhouse units. That's quite the description of the lot plan. That's amazing. I've never seen one that long. Anyways, I read it. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Nobody cares to move it or second it? Wow. Okay. I guess it's defeated. All right. Ms. Martin, what happens next?
I'll defer to the clerk on that matter, but I believe if we don't have a mover and a seconder, does that mean that it's a negative? Or I'm not certain from a procedural standpoint.
I think the motion dies. The
Did-
resolution dies. Unless there's an amended motion.
I haven't weighed in on it because I was not present at the meeting in May. I was away on vacation, so I wasn't present for that meeting other than reading the minutes. I didn't see all of the concerns that were raised. I understood that they were all addressed by the developer. So anyway, I'm just sort of sitting back right now because I was
I guess, well, you're not moving or seconding, and so I'm not calling the question. So I'll hear from Councillor Strakoyan. Go ahead, Councillor Strakoyan.
Apologies, I was waiting for my council colleagues to see if they would do anything. I will move this. Thank you.
Okay, so the resolution has been moved. I'm looking for someone to second it. Okay, well, same outcome. So this resolution dies, as far as I know. Is that correct, Ms. Babcock-Cormier?
That's correct. Absent a seconder. So the seconder can be any member of council, but we don't have a seconder. So absent a seconder, then the motion dies. It's defeated.
And as chair, I can't second it.
You can second, actually.
Oh, well, I will second it. And as seconder, I'm going to ask for a recorded vote on this.
Okay.
And that means, from what I understand, the person asking for a recorded vote will be the first one to vote.
That is correct, Councillor.
Okay. All right. So I will call the question and I'm voting yay.
Okay. And Councillor Strakian.
Yay.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson. Yay. And Councillor O'Sullivan.
Yes.
Yay as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
So
I think we just gave the consultant a heart attack there. And
your motion passes.
yes.
4 yays.
So, yeah, motion passes. Holy mackerel.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on. Thank you. Well, thank you everyone who is here for this particular resolution for hanging in there to the exciting end. Next on the agenda is an item I'm very happy to see come forward, and that's the planning design guidelines. And Ms. Martin, please, would you like to speak to that?
Certainly, Councillor Barkley. So I do want to recognize that Forbes Simon from JP2G is also in attendance at the evening this evening. I will just get us across the finish line. But before I do, I just want to recognize Forbes and all the work that went into the creation of our design guidelines, the many conversations, and just working collaboratively with him to create a document that truly reflects North Grenville and whether it's the interests of the community, but providing a cohesive document that will help guide development in North Grenville as we move forward. More on the design side, what I do want to highlight is the fact that these design standards they're not regimented in the sense that a development is not required to you have to meet every single standard within this document. What really drove the creation of the document was the fact that there was no standards or expectations set by the municipality. Certainly, we had performance standards or metrics within our official plan and other policy documents, but they weren't consolidated within one location. So the design guidelines built upon our official plan policies when it comes to design and fit and feel of a development, pulled in some standards from some of our other internal policy documents, but also looked to other best standards in other municipalities with design standards for development where our documents may have fallen more silent on. So that especially what was very exciting to see in there was the consideration of some sustainable design considerations for development, something that our policy documents don't address. So before council tonight, we'll just go to the next slide, and I just wanted to provide an overview as to what the design guidelines are, and from our consultation session that we held with council and the development community, what changes came about in the document based off the comments that we received. So the design guidelines will act as I call them our developer's handbook to development. It provides background on process. It provides, what the municipality looks for in development applications and considerations that developers, both those who are seasoned within North Grenville, as well as those coming into the municipality as a first-time developer can expect. It establishes our process and requirements for development. It applies to our site plan and our applications for plans of subdivision. So those are our two main development applications where we have a lot of influence over the development and feel of a property. And what's important to note is that this will work in coordination with our other municipal documents, including the forthcoming engineering standards that are being developed on the public works side. So they're meant to be complementary documents that work together. I always like to tease Director Dunlop and say I am the fun and she is the function. And certainly that's how these two documents are intended to operate with each other. So again, it's not a replacement for any of our official plan or other planning policy documents that have to be addressed, but certainly it's to provide some enhanced guidance to developers in North Grenville as to what the expectations are on the part of the municipality for developments. Next slide, please. So the document layout, I won't go through each section as we had a very comprehensive council meeting with members of council where we walked through each of the sections, but they're there for you on the screen just to see just the different elements incorporated into the design guidelines. Next slide, please. As for the process, with Mr. Simon and myself, Forbes, we worked with an internal steering committee of staff to develop what essentially became just the skeleton of the document. So we developed the table of contents and did a lot of feedback. Certainly our kickoff meeting focused on a lot of what are some of the pinch points in development? What are some of the things that are often, misunderstood? What are areas that we would like the development community to know about? So certainly that helped formulate the categories that you saw on the previous screen. We held 2 consultation sessions, one with council, which was probably one of the most, thorough going through the documents and providing a feedback, and it was very well received. And that feedback certainly made its way back into the document. But we also held one with our development community. So that session allowed for developers who will be using our documents to interact with staff, to provide us with some feedback, and certainly just again that reiteration of this is not a replacement for the official plan or other policy documents. This is a document that's supposed to help supplement the information and provide some guidance and direction, which had been missing in the past with many developments, and create kind of a standard across North Grenville. And that's having those standards established up front avoids those back and forths further into the review process, and clears up any of that uncertainty that may arise. Staff also attended multiple advisory committee meetings to explain the intent of the design guidelines and to provide committee-specific areas of interest. So certainly highlighting which parts of the document a committee might be interested in. I know the Environmental Action Committee, I really focused a lot on the sustainable design principles, because I know that is something that is near and dear to their hearts. We also collected comments from internal departments and our development agency. And if we go to the next slide, I'll just explain a little bit as to some of the changes that were made. So a lot of the changes that were suggested had to do with the language being used within the document. So in certain circumstances, some of the language was softened, again, because this is not the requirement document. Surely it's a document staff will use when reviewing site plans and plans of subdivision, and developers will use it as part of the development process. But allowing for that flexibility, because design can be creative, and sometimes the design might not necessarily fit into the provision within the design guidelines. So again, the intent of the guidelines is to assist with our development process. So it was important that we had wording that wasn't overly rigorous, but provided more flexibility for that creativity to occur. So we also made an effort to ensure that when we referenced certain standards, we identified which documents they came out of. So referring back to the appropriate sections of the official plan or another policy document within the municipality, and making sure that we have the proper title references to the various policies and studies within the municipality. The other item that we reworked and rewrote was in regards to our private road provisions. So there was a section in the design guidelines that were specific to private roads. There was a lot of concern that was raised at our developer session just over how it was a little prescriptive in regards to certain requirements. So what we've done is pared back those provisions and relying on a case-by-case basis review for private road development, but also reliance upon our engineering standards, which is the appropriate document that will set what the requirements will be for the road width of a private road. Next slide, please. So I always like to, at every committee meeting, I provided some final thoughts as to, from a staffing perspective, and I'm certain council will weigh in with what their perspective on these design guidelines are and what they mean for council and the municipality at large. But what I like about these design guidelines, it establishes the clear expectations of the municipality. So there's no questions over what type of tree species, what our vision is for, a complete street, what our, ideas are for sustainable design or how we'd like to see parklands. That's established and laid out, and those expectations are very clear. It also creates a checklist for staff when we review applications. So certainly being able to take the guidelines and review it against a development application to say, did it include these design elements? Are we missing something? And really focusing on ensuring that we're creating development that is connective to the surrounding area on a multitude of different levels, not just how it connects into the site, but how it blends in with the existing neighborhood. And in line with, a lot of the items that were coming out of our strategic planning process, it encourages principles of smart growth and complete communities. So certainly trying to ensure that when we're creating developments, again, it speaks to how does it integrate with the community around it, and how is it leveraging smart growth principles to ensure that we're building developments that is sustainable over the long run, and not just on the environmental aspect, which is also important. And I believe that is my end of my formal presentation. I do, again, want to recognize Forbes. And Forbes, I'm not certain if you wanted to add anything else at this point in regards to the design guidelines, but certainly you were, the driving force in being able to get this completed. You brought a lot of that vision, in coordination with council and staff and the development community to create something that truly is unique to North Grenville.
Mr. Simon, go ahead.
Excuse me, Chair.
Forbes.
Yes, thank you.
I apologize.
Thank you. That's all right, sir. All I want to do is thank the community for giving me the opportunity to work with you. It was a fascinating project, and it came together quite well. And I think that Amy and I made a fairly good team pulling this together, and it was a pleasure. And I'm at your service if I can help you out again in the future. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'm glad the document's being well received.
Thank you. Yeah, it certainly is well received. It's one of, I think, one of the major accomplishments of this council, if I do go on a limb and say that. I think it's wonderful to send a clear signal to developers coming in that, we've given some thought to smart growth, that we appreciate integrated planning, and that we encourage them to pre-consult, as much as possible, so they have an idea of what the expectations of this community is, as expressed through this document. Gone are the days, hopefully, of sort of a patchwork development, and it's truly smart growth. And as Amy pointed out, we're in the process of building a connected, complete community where it's all integrated. So I think it's a marvelous document, and I'm very proud of what we've been able to accomplish, and hats off to both Ms. Martin and yourself, Forbes. And I'll open up to questions from my council colleagues. Go ahead, Councillor O'Sullivan.
Thank you very much, through you, Councillor Barkley, to Director Martin and Forbes. I just wanted to thank you and your team for all of the due diligence that went into creating this design guidelines. I think it's something that we really need, and I really appreciate you bringing the draft to both the active transportation and the accessibility committees, advisory committees, so that they would have input and understand what was being brought, and that their needs and their wants were addressed in the design guidelines. So I thank you very much for that. And I'm willing to either move or second this acceptance of this approval of this design guidelines.
Thank you for letting me know. I wish I could move it, but I'm chairing it, so I can't. So I'll give you consideration when we get to that point. Any other comments or questions from council colleagues? Seeing none, then I will look for a mover, and I guess that would go to you, Councillor O'Sullivan, for the following. Be it resolved that council adopts the planning design guidelines for the municipality of North Grenville. Looking for a seconder then. Councillor Wilson, will you second this? Okay, great, thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. Councillor Strachan is suffering, obviously. Get well soon. Okay, so moving on. We have no reports from Public Works, Parks, Rec, and Culture, Emergency and Protective Services. Ms. Babcock-Cormier, do we have any correspondence that we need to consider? I don't see any here.
I confirm there is none.
Yeah, okay. No other business. Now, notice of motions. Was this meeting that notice that I had 2 weeks ago?
It's coming.
It's coming.
It's coming
Okay.
for the
All right.
next. Yes,
I'm
it'll
just
be on the
asking.
agenda. Yeah.
I don't want to
it'll
forget
be-
about it. I don't want to
Nope,
forget
it'll be
about it.
posted on your Thursday agenda.
Oh, great. Thanks so much.
No problem.
We've already introduced and considered the bylaws.
Mhm.
So now we're into questions from the public or the media. Do we know if we have any members of the public or the media attending? Or did you get any written questions or comments from public or media?
I can confirm that the questions that were received were already addressed by Director Martin in her presentations. We received no other questions or comments from the media, and we have no members of the public or media still remaining in the meeting.
And thanks to the helpful script from the clerk's office, we're now going to pass a resolution to confirm the proceedings of council at this regular meeting held on June 15th, 2022. We're going to confirm the proceedings and that they, oh, well, how does this, good. I better read it verbatim rather than try and improvise. Be it resolved that bylaw 56-22 to confirm the proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on June 15th, 2022 be adopted and passed. I'll be looking for a mover for that. Please, thank you, Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor O'Sullivan. All in favor? Okay, moving on. Now we're going to address resolution to adjourn. Any last words from members of council here? No?
Thank you, Councillor Barclay, for chairing the meeting. Wonderful
Well,
job. Thank you.
Well, it was certainly an interesting one.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, so looking for a mover and a seconder. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council adjourn at 8:50 p.m. Who's going to move that? Great. Councillor O'Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Stracher-Yan. And I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay.